Welcome to Let's Thrive Postpartum.
Hi, and welcome back to Let's Thrive Postpartum. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Ashley.
Today, we want to share some information from Kristin Revere. We'd like to talk about the benefits that doulas can provide to new moms, whether you're pregnant or in that postnatal period. Kristin Revere is the owner and founder of Gold Coast Doulas in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She's an elite certified birth doula, a newborn care specialist, a childbirth educator, and an elite certified postpartum doula. She's also the author of Supported, Your Guide to Birth and Baby, and the host of Ask the Doulas podcast. She's a mom of two and a bonus mom to one.
This is a really good conversation. We talk so much about all the different ways that women can find support while they're pregnant and during the postpartum phase. And doula care is one of them, but there's also so many questions surrounding it. So we're going to talk through what the doula care looks like, what services her agency provides, how Kristin found herself on this road from doing a very big career change into the doula world, and just lots and lots of really good information about how doulas support moms and how they can support you if you're out there listening. So we're excited for you to take a listen.
Kristin, welcome so much to Let's Thrive Postpartum. We're really excited to have you as our expert guest this week and to learn more about everything that you are doing to help moms. If we could start off, I'd love if you would kind of introduce yourself to our listeners. How did you become a doula? What inspired you to found Gold Coast Doulas and host a podcast? Tell us more.
Thanks, Kelly and Ashley. So, where to begin? My background is actually in political fundraising, advertising sales, a little bit of public relations. I had children late in life. And so when it came to assembling my dream team of experts, a lot of my friends had advice that was outdated. And I was working on a governor's race, was trying to prepare. My dream was to have an unmedicated hospital birth. And so I ended up switching providers and found a nurse midwifery practice that I was able to switch to early enough in pregnancy. And at the time I was pregnant, I didn't know what doulas were. My daughter's almost 14. And so I ended up taking Lamaze class with my husband. And he had a lot of fears going in because his daughter from a prior marriage had been born by emergency cesarean. And like firemen showed up at his house. It was all very traumatic for him.
Oh gosh.
And so for me to want an unmedicated birth when he had completely opposite situation with a daughter in the NICU for multiple weeks, that terrified him. So I had to do a lot of education. We read The Birth Partner and watched documentaries and did a lot of work around that. And I just thought it should be easier. So long story short, I ended up creating a solo doula practice and later my agency, Gold Coast Doulas, to solve the problems that I had in my own pregnancies. And with my second, I did hire doulas. But with my first, I developed preeclampsia at 37 weeks, was on bed rest, was induced. And so things didn't go completely to plan, but I did avoid most interventions, had a vaginal birth. But my daughter was in the NICU for 4 days with glucose issues. So feeding was a struggle. And I did not develop any perinatal mood disorders, did not have depression or anxiety related to the birth. So personally cannot relate to that, but I did have a lot of support within lactation and my community with my childbirth class. The fellow students, we gathered together quite a bit. So I created a community that I needed emotionally during that time of transition.
Yeah. So you've got a team now that's built out, and it sounds like you guys have probably had so many experiences with lots and lots of different moms. What have you seen? So I guess tell a little bit about doula care, like what that looks like during pregnancy and postpartum. And so what have you seen that I guess could be considered maybe preventative for some of the like mood and anxiety disorders that women experience during pregnancy or after giving birth? But also like what kind of support is there after birth that doulas can provide? Because like you, I was similar, and I know Kelly, you've said the same thing. Like with my first child, I didn't know what a doula was. I'd kind of heard about it. And then you hear it's like, oh, well, are they there just during birth? Are they there while you're pregnant? Do they come afterwards? And I just didn't know.
Yeah,
I think the answer is D, all of the above. So
it is actually.
yeah.
Yes. So the earlier you hire a birth doula, the more support you're going to receive. One of the roles of a doula is information. So we are experts in the area that we cover. And at Gold Coast, it's about a 50-mile radius of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And so we know all of the experts in the birth and baby space. If our client is looking for a support group, for example, in pregnancy, say, they're having some anxiety, if they're looking for a therapist with a particular specialty, then we can give referrals that we personally know and trust.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So that's probably that can be a really big support. And then what about on the back end, like after someone's given birth? What role does a doula play sometimes then?
Sure. So birth doulas typically stay about an hour to an hour and a half after the birth. We check in on our clients when they're still in the hospital or, the home birth at home, and see how they're doing emotionally, how they're processing the change. If they need any resources, again, we can give them everything from lactation support groups to perinatal mood disorder groups to meet their needs in that moment. Because as you know, that follow-up visit with your provider is 6 weeks away, and so much can happen in 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we have postpartum doulas and newborn care specialists on our team, so that role is different. A birth doula does have a follow-up visit within 2 weeks typically of the birth to see how our clients are doing emotionally, physically, with recovery, with answer feeding and newborn questions. And again, give those resources. We are trained to notice any changes that may be happening as far as mood disorders, anxiety, depression. We are then able to speak to partners and our client about, what to look out for, and even the shifts that change with feeding. Like when you introduce food, you can have, as like some mood changes there. And when in the first week and the first 6 weeks, there are many times to look out for. And then weaning is also a time that you can have some hormone fluctuations and feel a little weepy. And so we like to explain the difference between baby blues and perinatal mood disorders.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I love that. So we just all started this question with the fact that we didn't know we didn't know what a doula was when I was having a child, and I wish I did. Ashley didn't either. So you
Yeah.
explained a lot about what a doula does and all the support they can provide. For our moms who are listening, if they're in the Grand Rapids area, obviously it's very easy to reach out to you. We'll include all that information in the show notes. But if you're a mom somewhere else in the country, is there a resource that moms can go to find doula care in their area?
Good question, Kelly. So certainly looking at doula training organizations,
Okay.
Pro Doula Dona Kappa list doulas who've been certified through their organizations. There is a service called Doula Match that you can find doulas in your area, see their bios and their experience levels.
Great.
So if I get any questions or friends in different areas reach out to me wanting to find the perfect doula, that's one place to start. And then, of course, you can always search on Google about find a doula near me. And really, it's about looking at the experience level that's desired. If a client is going for like a VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, then it would be helpful to have a doula who is certified and also experienced in supporting VBACs. And, if a home birth is the goal, then finding a doula who's comfortable attending births at home beside a home birth midwife, that is.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's a great resource because I think so many times we've talked to moms and experts who just say, I wish I would have known. And so I think
Right.
part of our mission is doulas are a great resource. We'd love all moms to know if they're interested, consider this, right? I definitely wish I would have had that support and known about it.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think that I think too that I wish I would have known piece goes back to also like so many things during pregnancy and motherhood in general. And when you
Yes.
mentioned, Kristen, like talking about like one of a doula's like one of the biggest roles is like educating new moms and new parents, where I guess just in broad strokes, like why do you guys feel, and we feel the same way, but like why is information and education about all of these things so important for parents?
So you don't get a do-over of your birth or your postnatal phase. So the more you prepare and understand what your body's going through and understand how to advocate for yourself, you don't end up feeling like birth happened to you and you just became a patient and followed, whatever your provider suggested. If you have that knowledge, and your partner does, if you have a partner, in order to support you throughout pregnancy, and also that planning of who are you going to bring on to your personal and professional dream team? Do you want family to support you? Or do you want to hire a professional like a birth or postpartum doula, a au pair nanny, however you want to plan for childcare after? We are in a childcare shortage. So the earlier you plan for that, the better.
yeah, we have this big childcare shortage here in South Carolina as well that we unexpectedly found ourselves in, right? It's all the pre-planning stuff that having backup plans is always a great idea.
Yes. And
Yeah.
if you want to breastfeed, taking a breastfeeding class is going to set you up for success versus winging it. I'm a planner by nature, type A personality. So for me in my pregnancy, I did as much as I could, but we as doulas, can help those clients that don't want to plan, but the more they know, the more knowledge they have personally, the better prepared they are for anything that may come up in birth or in the postpartum phase.
That makes
Yeah.
so much sense. Let me ask this, Kristen. So we've talked a lot about get education plan. Are there any other strategies or things moms can do to really feel prepared, even if it's like looking at setting up an environment or getting their partners involved? Any tips that a mom listening could do to help herself feel supported?
Certainly communicating your unique needs to your family and friends during pregnancy. Some of my clients want family in the room when they deliver or in the waiting room, and others want it to be a private experience. And the same goes for that postnatal time in that 6-week recovery period. The more visitors, the better may work for one personality, or focusing on getting as much rest as possible, bonding with baby, limiting visitors, and setting some boundaries is so important early versus having to advocate during labor or after the birth and having those uncomfortable, family discussions.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's something I talk with clients about all the time. So much of it goes back to like communication and how are you feeling able to like advocate for yourself? Have you even considered like what you want your postpartum experience to look like, and a lot of times they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, I figured we would just be there. And I'm like, I know, but what is your husband's plan? What's his family's plan,
Right.
right? Like, what is, and are you okay with that? And is that because that's where so much sometimes that, as a new mom, that conflict comes in is like, oh, I didn't tell people that I don't want people over here all the time. Or I realize suddenly, like, I'm not comfortable breastfeeding in front of all these family members. And now I have to go to my room right. And so there's all these situations that come up that sometimes when you can think through it a little bit, it's helpful. I definitely fell into the winging it category with my first. and was very firmly planted in the planning category with my second. And it made
Beautiful.
a very big difference. And so I think it's hard, I think, for moms sometimes to, if you're not a planner, you're like, oh, I think it'll, I'll just know, or everything will come so naturally, especially like I was wanting to have a more natural birth experience, which in my brain for some reason meant that I shouldn't be planning and I would just know what to do. That was false.
Right. Your body
Um,
knows what to do, but if you're
yeah.
in a hospital environment, then things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just because, and we tell people a lot, like learning and getting educated and having all of this information, it's not to scare people, but it's just so that like what your options are, like you do with anything else in life. It's good to know like what your options are and what the facts are, so that you know how to ask for help when you need it.
100%, Ashley. I always say if you don't know your options, you have none. So,
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
true.
I'm going to keep that one on file. That's a good one.
all right.
So let's talk about self-care if we can. Ashley and I talk about this a lot. We've talked about the stigma of the word self-care, which sounds bad. Even if there's no stigma attached, sometimes it's just impossible to fit in when you're pregnant or when you just gave birth and you're in that postnatal period. What are some simple ways that doulas encourage moms to prioritize themselves? And do you have any tips or advice for moms listening in this area?
I do. And I do feel like self-care, again, it's hyped up to be a spa day or
Mm-hmm.
massage, getting your nails done, pampering yourself. But really, it's finding out what relaxes you. And so when my clients hire our postpartum doulas, I send a communication form. And the clients then fill out different activities that relax them. And whether it's reading, taking a walk, being in nature. And then our doulas try to focus on prioritizing that form of self-care
Mhm.
during the early parenting stage.
Yeah. Does the doula kind of help encourage the mom, or if the mom is like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna like what I should do," does she kind of has remind them that they created this list that they do know and that here maybe this is something they could go and try.
Absolutely.
Oh
So
yeah.
if it's having a cup of tea on their patio and taking a moment for themselves where they feel like their free mom self and allowing themselves to be waited on by others. Some personalities have a hard time because they're caregivers and want to serve, having a doula come into their home to care for them. So women feel like, especially in American culture, that we should suck it up, do it all ourselves, be superheroes. We are superheroes anyway, without having to do it all alone. And so it's important to ask for help, whether you have a doula or you have a friend over. But one thing for new moms to think about is that during pregnancy, you're being celebrated with showers. People ask how you're feeling, and you're being celebrated. Your belly's talked about frequently. But then after you have baby, it's all about baby. And the
Yep.
mother feels lost. And often, if visitors come, they want to hold the baby, they bring gifts for the baby, but the mother feels alone and isolated, doesn't know how to ask for help for herself in this transition phase.
Yeah.
And unless there's a doula there, it's important to share the birth story, to process what happened. And friends and family may not know to ask the right questions or to check in on them, or maybe bring some self-care items for the mom so they feel like they are also important in the process and it's not just the outcome of having baby or multiple babies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
true. I feel like we've talked to a lot of moms who have gone through kind of that shift in what's happening, why you do. Because I did it. I think I went on, I think I've said this before, I went on an apology tour after having a kid because I showed up for my friends and family for the baby, completely missing that my best friend had a child, right? I mean, like, just,
Same.
I, right.
Mhm.
And I make sense. It completely, but we tend to focus on the baby when before we focused on the mom. So giving that mom support is really crucial, especially in the mental health transition that's happening after birth.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, and increasingly, and this is talked a lot about too, like if you don't have a huge community around you, and most people right now in the US, it kind of varies depending on where you live and family and friends. That's not naturally there where you're going to have
Right.
lots of people coming in to ask, or lots of other moms who know now to ask, right? I think most people before you had kids, you didn't know that you needed to ask certain questions.
Right.
And so I think that's like a really important role that a postpartum doula can play. Especially, I mean, for anyone, but especially if you're the first one in a friend group to have a baby, right? Like none of your other friends have babies. I hear all the time that feels very isolating socially, but also you don't have anybody to talk to that is related, like can relate to your experience. And
Exactly.
yeah, so having some of those supports like built in and planned for can have a huge impact.
100%. And, postpartum doulas, whether it's a daytime doula or an overnight doula, will prioritize rest. So, the saying of sleep when baby sleeps, and trying to carve in time and not having to focus on household tasks or doing all the things, really resting and bonding and feeding baby, and also feeding and nourishing yourself. But with sleep deprivation, as you know, Ashley, the rates of perinatal mood disorders increase as you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And so at Gold Coast, we offer a therapy discount of $2 off per hour to allow our families to get more support than they would otherwise be able to afford if they are struggling with perinatal mood disorders or have a history of anxiety and depression or PTSDs where they need that additional support.
Oh, that's really wonderful.
That is wonderful because you can't feel better without sleep. I mean, you just
Right.
can't. Your brain can't heal.
Yep.
Exactly.
If people are interested in learning more about Gold Coast Doulas, connecting with you, finding more information, tell them how they can get in touch with you, your podcast. Let us help them find you.
Sure, Kelly. So Gold Coast Doulas can be found at goldcoastdoulas.com. And we are on social media at Gold Coast Doulas. So everything from Pinterest, which is great for birth and baby planning, to Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And my book, Supported Your Guide to Birth and Baby, that does include a mental health chapter written by a perinatal mood disorder therapist, can be found at supportedbook.com, on Amazon, and it's available on Audible, iTunes, hardcover, paperback, and in select bookstores and all of the online book retailers. And my podcast, Ask the Doulas, interviews experts like yourselves in the birth and baby space, and is available on all the podcast players at Ask the Doulas.
Wonderful. So if you're not in the Grand Rapids area, you can reach Kristin in so many other ways through her book, through her podcast. It's a great resource and information for all of us new moms. Kristin, anything else that we didn't ask you yet you would think our mom listeners would want to know?
Trust yourself. No one knows your body or your baby the way that you do, so advocate for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's like one of the most important ones, really.
It is.
And we forget so often that we do know ourselves best. That's hard to do nowadays sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kristin, thank you so much for being here today. We will include links to everything Kristin referenced in the show notes, so check it out.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks. That was so great, Ashley. I know we've said it a couple times with some of the experts that we've spoken to, but I tend to kind of look back at, my childbirth experience and what I would have done different. And a doula was just not a care support person that I knew existed. And so the amazing things that Kristin and Gold Coast Doulas and doulas just across the country are doing for moms is so beneficial to their mental health. And so it's one of those, if you don't know what a doula is, we hope this episode has been educational, but also it may just be something you want to consider in your support team, because I think they can really make a difference. And I wish I would have had one.
Yeah, 1000%. And I think too, even if you're already a mom, right? We know we can't go back and redo our own birth experiences. But if you have a friend that's pregnant, this is again like pass on the information, pass on the education because you don't know what you don't know. And when there's so many things when it comes to motherhood, we talked in this conversation about the importance of education and the role it plays. But it's even with things like this, like if you hear some information, you're like, huh, I didn't know that, but like I have a friend that's pregnant or I have a sister that's pregnant. Now you can turn to them and say, hey, have you ever thought about a doula? I just heard this podcast and this is what it is. And that's how we spread information that can help moms. Because as most of us know, when you look back, you're like, I mean, I didn't intentionally do a lot, like I didn't intentionally do it or not do it. I just didn't know. I didn't know it
Mhm.
existed, or I didn't know why it would be helpful. And I think doulas, that is one of the things they can be so helpful and beneficial from pregnancy, at like during childbirth and during the postpartum phase. There are doulas that specialize in all three of those different phases. And yeah, I think it's a really wonderful service that exists almost everywhere. There are even programs in some states that, can help provide them for different communities and that kind of thing. So it's just something it's just not talked about enough.
Well, hopefully this was really helpful.
Yeah.
And remember, moms, you're not alone. We're here with you. If you have questions, email us at any time at podcast@wethrivepostpartum.com.
Yep.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next time.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please be sure to hit subscribe, leave us your feedback, and give us a 5-star review. For even more support, visit us at wethrivepostpartum.com/podcast to sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community. Remember, you are not alone. With support, you can feel better. Together, let's thrive postpartum.